Hey everyone, I've been seeing a bunch of people doing the Booktube Newbie Tag, and today, it's a pretty gray day out. I thought we'd have a go at it and just answer some of the questions that are on the list. So let's get into it. Okay. So the first question is, why do you start this channel? And just for a little bit of context, so I kind of see this channel being one about discussions and thinking and thoughts on like books that I'm reading, and I think taking maybe a little bit more of like an analytical approach to trying to dissect and wrestle with the ideas that an author is like putting forward in a book, whether that be in fiction or in like historical literature or in classics or any sort of genre. And I think secondly, I kind of want this channel to be sort of like at the intersection of some of my reflections in tech and being a computer scientist and a computer science student. And I think that intersection of the two of those things, the sort of like engaging in discussion around like literature, is something that you don't really see too often in a lot of computer science circles. And so I kind of want this channel to be, for anyone who's maybe for anyone who's kind of like similarly comes from like a tech or engineering or computer science background, but also has a deep appreciation or maybe even a growing appreciation for literature and for books, and maybe doesn't always find the spaces and the places to be able to have those discussions in those tech and in those computer science spaces. So yeah, I guess a long-winded answer, but that's kind of the reason why I started the channel. Okay, so the second question is, what are some fun and unique things that you can bring to Booktube? And for that, I definitely lean on the fact that I'm sort of coming at this as someone who's trying to grow their appreciation for literature and get more into contemporary fiction and historical fiction, and just, I guess, like books that are kind of like pushing me a little bit more to expand past my my current horizons and the kind of books that I would typically read. And yeah, I hope that I can share my journey, especially as someone who's coming from like tech and computer science, and those circles aren't always the most welcoming to literature and the most like they aren't really always like the circles that I think seek the widest perspectives, especially with like books and literature, and they tend to be way more towards like self-help and like maybe like history and that sort of stuff. So I hope that this can be a space where I can share like a unique and like fun perspective of my learnings and my journey as I'm growing broadening my my interest in literature and in books and fiction and all the different genres. Third thing is, what are you most excited about for this channel? And I think that one's pretty easy, just to develop a community where hopefully I can, get recommendations and just have more like interactive discussion with people about how we are wrestling with the ideas of different books that we're reading. So for example, right now I'm reading On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong, and I think that like talking about my reflections from those from a book like that, especially because it's something that's so intimate and so tied to like the immigrant experience and being an immigrant or being from a family that immigrated to America, I think that it'll be like so exciting to see like what pieces resonated with other people compared to like what pieces most resonated with me in my own experience. And I think just having that discourse and having those conversations, I'm just so excited for them, because honestly I don't get to have them that often. I don't get to have them in my work, like in tech, and yeah, I'm just super excited to have a community and foster that sense of discussion and engaging in thoughts and thinking. And yeah, I'm just really excited to create this space and to see where it goes. So the fourth question is, why do you love reading? And I think that one is a pretty easy one, because I think the best part about it is just being able to get a glimpse of how other people or other characters, other stories of how people are navigating the world. And I know, especially like as someone who's been caught up in computer science and who went to an engineering school, it's like been so easy for me to get caught up in that echo chamber and in that bubble of seeing the world from specifically like a computer science lens or a tech lens. But obviously that's just a narrow sliver of how people more generally like navigate and go through the world. And yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing of why I love reading, is being able to see and get a glimpse of how other people are navigating the world, and also just like the escapism and being able to completely immerse myself in a story and feel like super compelled to just pick up the book and continue reading and being so immersed in that story. I mean, that part is also good as well. The next question is, what book or series got you into reading? And so that's a tough one, because I mean, I want to say, I know it's a bit basic, but probably like Harry Potter or like Percy Jackson or like any sort of like mythology and like Greek mythology. I remember reading those books when I would come back home from school, and like actually also just like reading it with friends and chatting and talking about those books and pretending to have the same like demigod powers as Percy and trying to reimagine what like what Greek gods we'd be aligned with if we were born into those worlds. So I would say like anything that was really like fictional and that had to do with like powers and magic, I was like absolutely a huge fan of when I was growing up and first getting into reading. So the next question is, what challenges do you think starting a YouTube channel will have? And so I think probably just being a little bit more confident with my thoughts and with articulating my thoughts, and knowing that I'm like putting this this out into the world. I think, it's always sort of like a daunting thing to do, but I'm really excited for that aspect. And I think the more comfortable and the more like I think the more videos that I create, and the more that I get used to putting my thoughts out there, just the more comfortable I'm gonna get, and also just like the better that I'm gonna get at putting my thoughts out there. And I think this honestly also ties into the first question is, why did I create this channel? It's also just because I think that putting these videos out is just a great way to retain a little bit more of the ideas and the content of the books that I'm reading, because when you're speaking about them and when you're watching the videos back, you're just engaging with the material, you're engaging with the text way more than you would when you just like read it and then maybe move on to the next book. So I think I'm really excited for that, even though I know it'll be a challenge, but I'm excited to see where it takes me. And hopefully in like a year or like 2 years, I'm just much better at being able to recall and remember my thoughts and how I felt about the books that I've read. Because I think the biggest shame is to read a book and then a few months down the line, like kind of forget, oh wait, what were the main ideas? And even forget like what were my reflections, because I think those reflections can oftentimes be some of the most valuable things that we get, is like the ways in which that book encouraged us to think, or maybe pushed us outside of the ways in which we would normally think. The next question is, where do you read? So this is a little bit of a challenging one. So I guess I'll talk a little bit about like how I read and all that. So I'm still kind of struggling to figure out the right balance between like reading on Kindle versus reading with like paperback and physical copies of the book. I mean, obviously the advantages of Kindle are just that it's so much more manageable and portable and easy to carry. Whoops, yeah, somehow my camera died. But yeah, I think it's I think trying to find the balance between Kindle and paperback, just because I really like having the physical copy. And I mean, I'm sure most people could probably agree that there's nothing like having it physically in your hand, especially just for taking annotations or being able to reference. I think the biggest thing with Kindle is that like it's so much harder to flip through the entire book, because you kind of have to go to each chapter and then select the specific chapter and kind of know where you are. Whereas when you have a physical book, it's so easy to flip through and see your annotations from previous parts, and I really miss that aspect. Yeah, I just really miss it. But I think for right now, trying to find that balance, and then also using audiobooks as well. Those have been super helpful, I think, with more difficult texts. Using audiobooks as I'm reading has been really helpful to just keep me at a slower pace, but then also more focused and more attentive to the actual text on the page without without falling victim to wandering thoughts. And to answer the actual question as to where do I read, so I usually like to read, honestly, anywhere. I don't really have too much of a preference. It could be on the couch, it could be in my room, and I try and read usually in the morning and before I go to bed. And then if I have any pockets in between the day, maybe I'll go for a walk and listen to an audiobook. But in terms of when I'm reading the physical books, it's usually in the mornings or in the evenings is what I would say. So the last question is, what kind of books do you like to read? And for this, I would say that, like I said, like one of my intentions with this channel is to overall just expand and broaden the kinds of and the types of literature that I'm interested in, because I think when I really became an avid reader, I fell into like the self-help trap, and which is fine. I think it's great to read a lot of self-help books, but it's not always the most productive for trying to like get the most out of reading. I think you can learn so much from a story, you can learn so much about fiction, you can learn so much from like reading about other people's experiences that you wouldn't necessarily get when you just read the self-help genre. So to the right of me here, I actually have all my books in a suitcase because I'm actually trying to migrate all of them. But I just picked out a few that I think are pretty good representations of the kind of books that I like to read. To be honest, it can be anything, like I said, from like self-help to like contemporary fiction to historical fiction to just like more like historical books or history books in general, to more like journalism, like hyper like self-reflective kind of books, to plays, kind of like anything. So I've just picked a few books that I thought would be a pretty decent representation, and I'll just sort of go through them here. Okay, let's just get into it. Okay, so the first one I have here is These Truths by Joe Lepore. So this is like a history of the United States, just like a pretty thick one, but obviously like a history book. This one is more of like a self-reflective piece, more about like, I guess like relationships. This is Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton. If you're from the UK, you probably have heard of her. This one is a similar, kind of like in the similar kind of genre. This is I Feel Bad About My Neck by Nora Ephron. Yeah, similarly hyper self-reflective, kind of just like more like essay style, which I also kind of like quite like reading. This one is called An Immense World, and this is about, I guess this is maybe more like a science-y kind of book, and this is more about how different animals, the kind of like perceptory bubble that different animals have, and how they experience the world. So through like different senses that are different from the ways in which humans would experience the world. So for example, like if we had like a much stronger sense of smell, or if our ears were slightly more fine-tuned to different frequencies, how that would impact how we experience the world. Here, The Importance of Being Earnest, so some Oscar Wilde and some plays. Guy Debord by The Society of the Spectacle, so some philosophy. Don't roast me on this too much, but The Lean Startup, so Eric Ries. Some classic like tech books as well. Naomi Klein, some more sort of like journalism on climate. How We Get Free, Black Feminism by Keeanga Yamantha Taylor, and this I guess is a little bit more of like an analytical piece, so about society and about blackness and feminism and the intersection of the two of them. Then some more classic fiction, so some Murakami, and I also have here Pride and Prejudice, so Jane Austen, and lastly some poetry, 1,000 More, so some Mary Oliver. So as you can see, yeah, kind of like I'm kind of happy to read anything and kind of like everything, just whatever kind of comes into my field of view, and I'm definitely hoping that this channel can help expose me through maybe like some of your recommendations to other books that might be insightful and that I might enjoy reading. I think maybe the last thing I'll just say before I wrap up is that I'm not like super onto like TikTok or social media too much, so I'm kind of like definitely quite new to the whole like book talk and like booktube space. And I mean, I don't intend on posting on TikTok at all or being active there, but I think like one thing that I kind of noticed is that with a lot of these like booktubers or book reviews is that they kind of tend to be pretty like superficial like glossovers of like the books themselves, and they don't get into it as much like depth about like the actual ideas and the thoughts and what the author is trying to tell us with the story, which I think is just like really, really unfortunate, because the authors, writers put so much intentionality into the ways in which they formulate these stories or these texts or these writings, and I think it's a shame to not try and wrestle with those ideas a little bit more. And so one goal and aspiration that I have for this channel is just to be a little bit more thorough and have a little bit more depth to my analysis and the ways in which I talk about the books, and try and really like think about, okay, what is the author what ideas, what themes is the author trying to put forward with this text or with this book, and really trying to wrestle with those things rather than just just super quick recommendations of like 10 or so different books, which also has its place and is totally like nothing wrong with that at all. But I think there's a little bit more to be gained with a slower, kind of more intentional wrestling with texts and discussion of texts as well. But yeah, that's pretty much everything for me. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any suggestions for books that I might pick up next, definitely let me know. And if you enjoyed this video, feel free to check out another one here. And yeah, welcome to the channel, and see you in the next one.